I've been working in the mental health arena for over 20 years. I'm here today because Margaret has invited me. She's been inviting me for a while, but unfortunately I've been quite busy. I haven't been able to attend, but here I am now.
Right, great. So please tell us a bit more about what you do, because obviously you've heard a bit of Scar's testimony as a mother who has a child that has mental health issues.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear the beginning of that testimony. I heard the tail end of it. But I work with children and adolescents. I work with in children mental health from infants all the way up to, and I say to parents, adolescents at the age of 30. And what I mean by that is that the stages of development, what we notice in my line of work is that the stages of development tend to ebb and flow within the ages. And so you might find a child who acts very adult, or an adult, as Sky was just talking about there, who can sometimes act like a child. And so I have worked with parents to help them deal with the different stages of development that their children might tend to present in. But at this moment in time, I've got a practice of my own. I work in practice, taking cases on, and I also work in the NHS in CAMS. You might have heard of the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. I work in CAMS as well. I deal with all the kinds of referrals that come through CAMS's door.
And so what have you found has been the major effects of lockdown on children and adolescents that have mental health?
Well, it's an interesting one. You asked me that question, so I prepared a little something that I thought I'd talk to help us keep it in mind. I was just wondering if I might be able to share my screen.
Okay. Mimi, she said, I might be able to.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, could Yemi share her screen? Would you be able to do that?
Yes, she can.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Oh, she dropped off. Oh, Yemi, are you there?
I don't think she's gone.
Oh yeah, there's just her camera's off.
The camera's off. She should
share screen now.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Yemi, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm just trying to sort my screen out here. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just talk us through what are the most common problems whilst you're sorting out your screen? Otherwise, we're sitting in silence. We saw it flash up a moment ago. Okay. You need to unmute, Yemi. To unmute. You need to unmute. Mimi, can you send Yemi a message to unmute? Not sure if she realizes. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Much as I'm an accomplished child psychotherapist, I'm not very technical savvy, as you can see. Anyway, I am going to be talking to you about, and I've lost my screen. No. I've lost my screen.
We can see.
Yeah, we can see
Okay,
it.
right, okay, yeah, going back there. So I'm going to be talking to you about the impact of lockdown on mental health. And sorry, I might seem as though I'm whizzing through. I've said to Margaret that I might have to leave in a hurry if I'm called. So please bear with me. So I've got two stickers up. One of them saying, you know, stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. And another one saying, catch it, bin it, kill it. And I'm sure that, you know, we all have seen these at some points in time during the lockdown, which is, you know, the order by the government to stay in our homes. But this is all about bringing to our awareness the difficulties of what the country is going through at this moment in time, which is the pandemic, which has to do with coronavirus. And what I'll be talking about tonight is the impact of the lockdown on our mental health. I do know that there've been, you know, various different kinds of impacts on people in general from the lockdown. But because I only have so much time, I'm going to be talking about mental health at this point in time. Yeah. So if we think about mental health in general, first of all, I'd like to start with good mental health. And by good mental health, I mean, you know, the nature of mental health, our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And mental health, which is good, is usually mental health without a diagnosis or mental health without difficulty. Yeah, so I'm talking about the impact of lockdown, and the impact of lockdown on mental health is that, you know, we find that quite surprisingly, there are both negative and positive impacts to lockdown. There's been, you know, a few people who have been able to report positive ways of being, and there have been, you know, quite a few people who've reported negative ways of being. So we'll be talking about, you know, how the coping in general has come about, whether it's negative or positive. What do I do? Okay. So good mental health is characterized by the ability to learn, the ability to feel, express and manage a range of positive and negative emotions, as I've said before, the ability to form and maintain good relationships with others. So what we're finding is that a lot of people, because they've been locked down within environments that they're not used to staying in without being able to go out, they're either in environments where their relationships are difficult anyway, or they're on their own. So there's nobody to talk to, there's nobody to interact with. And so it's been difficult to maintain or form good relationships. Good mental health is the ability to cope with and manage change and uncertainty. So, you know, normally, you know, you go through a situation in life, you tend to find that the situations that you find yourself in are temporary. So you find that you can, you know, deal with them on a day-to-day basis. You know, they don't last too long. But unfortunately, in the lockdown, you know, if I'm right, this is the third lockdown so far. I'm talking about in London now. We had one in March, which ended sometime later. Then we had another one just before Christmas, and then it led straight into another one. So we didn't finish one before we went into another. So officially, we're in a third lockdown now. And that's difficult to cope with. You know, I'm a psychotherapist and I know a lot about mental health. And at some point in time, I used to think, well, I can deal with this. More recently, I've been thinking, look, it needs to come to an end now because I'm fed up. And, you know, I'm not somebody who's at this moment in time got difficult mental health. However, if I'm feeling as though it's difficult to manage, I wonder how people who are really struggling must be coping with this. So I'm going to talk about the impact, the negative impacts of lockdown now. In my line of work, what we're finding is that people are not able to see family and friends, and that is the main thing for most of us. We can't see family and friends. We can't mix. We can't socialize because this is what spreads the virus. Unfortunately, it's not a social way of being. You know, people are made to socialize, to be with people, to talk to people. And when we didn't have to be locked down, you know, this is something that we took for granted because you didn't have to measure it. You didn't have to, you didn't have anybody deciding for you how to do it or how not to do it. What people are finding is that they're extremely lonely. And, you know, the funny thing is that it's not just people who are on their own who are lonely. Even people within families are finding themselves lonely because, you know, in a lot of families, there are relationships, but then there are, you know, the relationships tend to have different qualities. And when you're when there's no lockdown, you're able to go out of your front door whenever you want to. So even if a relationship between a person is difficult, whether it be a spouse or a child, you know that you don't have to see them 24/7. You might go out, or they might go out, or you might spend time away from one another because you choose to within the same environment. Or, they might be involved in some activity or the other. So adults used to go to work, children used to go to school, or young adults used to go to, university and college. There was always somewhere to go. But unfortunately now people have to stay at home. And so there's a loneliness that's not just happening, when people are on their own, because there are some people who are on their own, but there's a loneliness that's happening within families because relationships aren't too good. People are finding that they're isolated and unable to go outside. So even within families, and sometimes where there are large numbers or members of families, people are finding that they feel isolated within large families as well, where the relationships are difficult. And then, for the people who have to be on their own, they're isolated as well because they don't have anywhere to go and they don't have anyone to talk to. People are finding that they're extremely concerned, extremely anxious and worried about the virus. For those of them that are in families and can go out or allowed out, they're worried that they might infect members of their family. So for instance, young children, unfortunately, the government and media have not, helped in this particular situation because people are saying children are the super spreaders and, they can pick up the virus without actually falling ill themselves. Unfortunately, children get to hear this and it doesn't do too much for their mental health, because what child wants to hear that the virus might kill adults in certain age range that your parent falls into, and that you might be the one who brings the virus home to them when the government has said you have to go to school. So you can't not go to school. So in situations where, they've had to go out and they've had to go to school, or they're the children of frontline workers and they have to go to school, there's a huge worry and a huge, development of mental health difficulty amongst the young, the children and young people about what they might be bringing home to members of their families. We're finding that lots of young people and adults and parents alike are resorting to self-harm because, there's nowhere to let the tension out except against themselves. So rather than, being able to go out, and exercise and play a game or just go for a walk, what people are doing now is that they're internalizing the stresses that they find themselves in. And, you know, by internalizing them, they're hurting themselves. So they're hitting themselves rather than hitting out. They're internalizing the pain rather than you know, like, than letting it out. And so there's a lot of self-harm that's going on, and, you know, worrying self-harm as well. There's a lot of low self-esteem and low confidence. And a lot of this has been seen amongst young people because they, you know, they're not being taught in school anymore. What we tend, you know, what we've tended to take for granted in the past is the fact that lessons are taught, and children are, you know, children and young people pick up information and knowledge and understanding from whatever it is that they're taught in school. So much as they might, you know, have displayed with bad behavior when they were in school, now that there is no teaching at all, or where they have to do the learning themselves, they're wondering how much they can learn themselves, how much they can learn on their own, and whether the quality of what they're learning is as good as, or, you know, as good as what the teachers used to teach them, or as good as what their peers themselves are learning. So they're feeling very, very unfulfilled in those kind of positions. On the other hand, we're also finding that there are, you know, that there are some young people and parents who are, you know, reporting positives to lockdown, and the positives that they're reporting are the fact that, you know, the fact that their families are finally able to stay together. So you have some families where mum was very busy going off somewhere to do her job, and dad was very busy going off somewhere to do his job, and the children were in school. Childminders used to pick them up, or whatnot, or maybe not, or maybe the children just used to come home, and maybe they were children who opened the door themselves and put themselves to bed because the parents were too busy, you know, having to run around making an income. But what they're finding now is that they're able to stay together, and a lot of, well, some people are enjoying this. Some people are reporting that their relationships have got better. So with what we're finding in camps, which is quite interesting, is that some parents are reporting that they're beginning to understand their children in a different kind of way. Because they're being forced together, they're learning to learn about their children. They're learning to listen to their children, and their children also are finding ways to learn to listen to their parents. And so communication is getting better because they're forced to be together. And in these kind of situations, they've chosen to work on their relationships rather than having to have conflict every day. What they're noticing as well is that because, you know, young people can't go out to, you know, fast food joints and be with their friends and stuff like that, they're having to eat at home. And most parents, because of, you know, the situation they find themselves in, are preferring to cook from the bottom up, because it's cheaper to cook from the bottom up if you can get all your ingredients. And cooking from the bottom upwards, which means, you know, making out, you know, starting your meals from the very first vegetable that you put into your pot, means that you're eating healthier. So children are finding that they're eating healthier meals. Parents are also finding that they're, you know, they're being able to be a little bit more creative in their cooking, and giving their family healthier meals. And, you know, it's kind of like a win-win situation, because children are beginning to commend their parents for their cooking and appreciate what it is that their parents are offering as well. We're also finding that some children that we used to see in camps who, you know, were chronic anxiety cases are actually becoming better, which is quite interesting. And it's a certain kind of child. I'm noticing that quite a few of them in my caseload have become less anxious. And, you know, it's not something that we're thinking about too much now, even though we're noting it. But what we're noticing is that there's a lot of argument for how early children are being sent out to school, how early children are being asked to, you know, to go into the school system. There are questions around whether the school system that we have is the right school system for children. But then, like I said, that's a question down the line. But it is, you know, we have noticed that there's, you know, more information. Well, we are seeing more evidence towards children doing better, having stayed at home